My name is Robin Dressler. I'm 42 years old. And on the night my husband's grandmother turned 90, my sister-in-law Bree stood up in a room with 26 people in it, put a small blue box in that woman's hands, and told her it was her own wedding ring made new, while the diamond out of that ring hung on a chain at Bree's throat where anybody could have looked at it. Connie opened the box and put the ring on, and it fit. It fit because somebody had measured her finger back in April and written the size down on a card. I'd asked her about it 26 days before that, on her own back steps, with my keys still in my hand. She didn't cry, and she didn't deny one thing. She looked out at her yard a while, and then she said, she was never going to wear it again, Robin. Here's what nobody in that room knew yet. There were 3 sheets of paper folded once in my purse, and one of them had a date printed at the top of it that nobody at that table was going to be able to argue with. Welcome back to Porch Stories, where the people who spend their whole lives keeping track of other people's things finally say out loud, whose was whose. If somebody in your family has ever decided that a thing you loved would look better on them, this one's for you. Tell me in the comments what it was they took, and go ahead and subscribe, because what a jeweler photographs before he ever touches a piece is the reason this story has an ending at all. Let me back up to the spring, and before I get to the spring, I have to tell you about Connie, because none of the rest of it lands if you don't know her hands first. Connie Dressler was born in a farmhouse outside Rowley, Indiana, in the middle of an August so hot that her father carried the bed out onto the screen porch, and she was born out there with half the road able to hear it. She has told that story at every birthday I've been present for, and every year she adds one detail she forgot the year before. Last year it was the dog. There was a dog under that bed the whole time, and nobody knew it until afterward. She's my husband's grandmother, not mine. I want that clear right at the front, because it matters to everything that happened later. I married into the Dresslers 21 years ago, and there's a whole branch of them that has never once stopped introducing me as Neil's wife, like it's a job title. But Connie made up her mind about me inside of 10 minutes at that first Sunday dinner. She looked at me across a bowl of green beans, said, "This one listens," and passed the beans. That was the entire ceremony. I've been in ever since, as far as she's concerned, and it has never come up again. Her hands are the thing I'd want you to see. 90 years old, and both of them are still working hands. Knuckles gone big and shiny. 2 fingers on the right that don't straighten all the way anymore. A burn scar across the back of the left from a pressure cooker in 1964 that she'll show you if you ask. And she'll tell you the beans were fine. She still makes pie crust. She won't use a machine, and she won't measure the water, and she does the whole thing with the heels of her hands in about 90 seconds, and it comes out right every time, which drives my daughter absolutely out of her mind. My daughter is Poppy. She's 9. She's got a gap in her front teeth she is very proud of, and a habit of narrating her own life out loud, like there's a camera on her. Poppy has been trying to learn pie crust off Connie since she was 6, and she wants a recipe. And Connie will not give her one, because there isn't one. There's a picture on my refrigerator of the 2 of them at Connie's counter, Poppy's hands under Connie's hands, flour up to both their elbows, Connie's mouth open because she was talking the whole time. That photograph matters later. Hold on to it. Connie moved into a 1-bedroom at Ambler Court 2 years ago. After the second winter, she couldn't get the drive cleared. She did not go quietly, and she did not go sadly. She priced it out on the back of an envelope, told the family what she'd decided, and was moved in by the end of the month, and she has beaten every soul in that building at euchre at least once since. Her neighbor across the hall is Ione Pruitt, who's 84, deaf in her left ear, and plays euchre like she's settling an old score. Ione's the one who calls me if Connie's light is off at a time it shouldn't be. Nobody asked her to do that. She just started doing it. My husband's name is Neil. He's 45, and he does furnace and air, which means from November to March, I mostly know him as a truck door closing at 10 at night and a plate in the microwave. He is a decent man and a slow one, and I mean that as a description, not an insult. Neil takes about 4 days to have a feeling about anything. In 21 years, I have learned that if you push him before day 4, you get whatever's easiest to say. And if you wait until day 5, you get the truth. I did not wait, this time. I'll get to that. I run the counter at Radke's Cleaners on the square, 19 years this October. Hank Radke owns it, and his wife Suzette runs the press. And Suzette is 61 years old and sings hymns wrong on purpose all day to see if anybody's listening. Hank is 68 and has a bad shoulder and a good memory and calls every customer by their last name, including the ones he went to high school with. Here's the thing about my job, and I'll only say it once, because it isn't the point of this story. It's just the reason I saw what I saw. Nothing leaves that counter without a ticket. Nothing. Not a coat, not a bridesmaid dress, not a quarter, not a folded 20, not a hearing aid, not a wedding band that came out of the pocket of a man's good trousers 3 weeks after his wife's funeral. There's a drawer under the register that Hank's father wrote "found" on in grease pencil sometime around the moon landing, and everything in it has a ticket number on it in Suzette's handwriting, and we hold it a year. Last year, I gave a man back a photograph of his mother that had been through the machine in a suit coat. It was gray and soft as tissue, and you could still make out her face. He stood at that counter and cried in front of 2 customers and a truck driver. That is not a rule Hank made up to be nice. That's the whole job. You take a thing out of somebody's hand, you write down whose it is, and when they come back for it, it's there and it's theirs. 19 years of that will change how your head works. It changed mine. There isn't an object in my house I couldn't tell you the owner of, and there isn't a thing in this world I'm more sure of than this. A thing belongs to somebody, and the somebody doesn't stop being true just because the thing changed hands. All right, now the ring. Sid Dressler bought it in the spring of 1957 in a store 2 towns over that hasn't existed since before I was born, and he paid it off at $4 a week for a year and 2 months. Connie knows the number of weeks. She has always known the number of weeks. It's a plain yellow gold band with 1 round diamond in it, and the stone is bigger than a man in his position had any business buying, which everybody in that family understood was the point. Inside the band, he had them cut 3 words and a date, Con from Sid, and under that, April the 6th, 1957. Con. Nobody alive calls her that. Sid died in 1991 and took the only mouth that ever said it with him, and the word stayed where he put it, on the inside of a ring, against her finger, for 34 more years. There's one more thing about that ring, and it's the thing that ends up mattering. In 1998, her knuckles got ahead of her, and she had it sized down at a shop over in the next county, and whoever did it cheap. The solder line came out bright and sat proud of the gold, a thin seam running across the bottom of the band that you could feel with your thumb. She could have had it fixed right. She never did. She just turned the seam around to the palm side and wore it that way for 27 years. And I have watched those hands deal cards and roll pie dough and hold my daughter's wrists 10,000 times, and I would know that seam in the dark. The last few years, the knuckles won for good, and the ring stopped going on and off, so it lived in a tin in her top drawer. A little flat tin that used to have mints in it, with a rubber band doubled around it so it wouldn't rattle. She'd take it out and set it on the arm of the chair sometimes while she watched her programs, the way some people keep a hand on a dog. And she said the same thing about it so many times that the whole family could say it with her, in her voice, and did, at Thanksgiving, to make her laugh. "It goes to Bree," she'd say. "It stays a ring, and the writing stays in it. Gold wears, writing doesn't." That was the whole of Connie's estate planning. One sentence, said out loud, for about 20 years, to anybody who'd sit still. Now I have to tell you about Bree, and I'm going to try to do it honestly, because the dishonest version is easier, and it's also the version that makes the end of this meaningless. Bree Dressler is 46. She's Neil's older sister, and she kept the family name through a marriage and never once thought about it twice. Her husband is Ross, who sells feed and seed and has the easiest laugh in 3 counties, and I've never known Ross to have a bad thought about a living person, which is going to be its own kind of problem later. Bree is the one who stayed. I need you to hold that the whole way through this. Neil and I live 11 minutes from Ambler Court, and Bree lives 6. And for 11 years running, she has done Connie's hair every Sunday afternoon. Sets it, dries it, trims the back, does the whole thing on a kitchen chair with a towel over Connie's shoulders and a coffee can of clips on the table. 11 years. That's better than 500 Sundays. She's never once made a show of it, and she's never once missed. And when Fran, that's Neil and Bree's mother, got sick 3 years ago, it was Bree. Not the hospice people, not the county, not Neil, who was working every furnace call in the phone book that winter because that's what he does with feelings. Bree slept in a recliner in that front room for 11 weeks. She's the one who was holding Fran's hand at the end, and she's the one who called us at 4 a.m, and she's the one who cleaned out the kitchen afterward because nobody else could make themselves walk in there. So don't let me tell you Bree Dressler doesn't love these people. She does. That's not the part that's wrong. What's wrong is what she thinks love entitles her to. Bree runs how this family looks. That's the honest way to say it. She does the Christmas card, the group text, the calendar, the seating, the obituary, the flowers. She writes the place cards for every family dinner in her round schoolteacher hand. And for 21 years, mine has said, Robin Loomis. Loomis is my maiden name. I have not been Robin Loomis since I was 21 years old. I mentioned it once, about a decade in a light voice, at a sink, with a dish towel in my hand, and Bree laughed and said she'd always thought Loomis suited me better, and the next Easter the card said Robin Loomis, and I stopped mentioning it. It's a place card. I know what it is. I'm telling you because I want you to see the shape of the thing before it got big, and because I stood there for 21 years deciding it was too small to bring up, and every year I decided that the shape got a little clearer, and I kept not looking at it. And there's a thing, Bree says. She's been saying it as long as I've known her, and she says it warmly, like she's handing you something. The first time I really heard it was in Fran's kitchen with a roll of newspaper in my hand, wrapping the good glasses, 3 weeks after the funeral. Bree took a serving dish out of my hands, looked at it, wrapped it herself, and said, "None of it's really ours, Robin. We're just the ones holding it." I thought that was the kindest sentence anybody handed me that whole winter. I repeated it to people. I got a little bit of comfort out of it every time something of Fran's went into a box. Hold on to that one, too. The first Saturday in April, Bree and I were both at Ambler Court at the same time, which happened maybe once a month. I'd brought Connie her sheets back from the shop and a sack of the little oranges she likes. Bree had the coffee can of clips out, and Connie was in the kitchen chair with the towel around her. Connie's birthday was coming, 90, in the middle of August, and Bree had been planning the party since Easter, the community room downstairs. The church tables, the good sheet cake from the bakery in Sedgwick, and a list of 26 people in her purse, with the ones who were shaky on stairs marked in pencil. She's good at it. I want to say that plainly. There is no version of that party that anybody else in the family could have thrown. And somewhere in the middle of it, with her hands in Connie's hair, Bree said, "Nan, let me take the ring in and get it opened up, so you can wear it on the day." I remember exactly how Connie's face did. 90 years old, and she went about 11 for a second. She said, "You think they could?" Bree said any shop could, that they'd put a hinge in it or size it up, whatever they thought was best, and that she'd have it back long before August. And Connie went into the bedroom and came back with the mint tin and worked the rubber band off it with those knuckles, which is not a fast operation, and not one person in that kitchen reached over to do it for her, because you don't. And she put the ring in Bree's hand. She said, "It stays a ring." And Bree said, "I know it does, Nan." I was standing at the counter with a sack of oranges in my arms. And here's what I noticed, and here's what I did about it. I noticed nobody wrote anything down. That's the whole thing. That's what 19 years behind a counter does to your head. A thing came out of one person's hand and went into another person's hand, and there was no ticket, no envelope, no note on the calendar, nothing. And a little cold spot opened up under my breastbone about it, and I looked at the two of them, an old woman glowing about a party, and a woman who had done that old woman's hair for 11 years, and I heard myself think the thing that I would give a great deal to have back. Don't be like that, Robin. It's family. It's not a coat. And I set the oranges down and put them in the crisper drawer and went home. I'll come back to that moment. It's mine. It belongs in this story with everything else. In May, Connie asked me to stay after a Sunday and help her with something, which she never does. She waited until Neil took Poppy down to look at the fish tank in the lobby, and then she went into the kitchen and got a card out of the drawer under the tea towels. It was one of those little cards that come in a box of 20, with a bird on the front. And inside, in her handwriting, which has gotten big and slow but never sloppy, she'd written it out for Bree, that the ring was bought in 1957, that Sid paid $4 a week for it for a year and 2 months and never once was late, that there were 3 words and a date inside it, and Bree should read them before she put it on. And at the bottom she'd written that she wanted to give it to her while she could still watch her put it on, instead of leaving it in a drawer for a lawyer. She wanted me to check her spelling. That's why she'd kept me back, 90 years old and worried about spelling. Then she said the thing that has cost me more sleep than anything else in this. She said, "I'm not doing it in a will. A will is for after. I want to see her face." I said the spelling was fine. It was fine. She put the card back in the drawer under the tea towels, and she told me not to say anything to Bree, because she wanted it to land right on the day, and I said I wouldn't. I have kept exactly one promise cleanly in this entire story, and that's the one. June came and went. Once, at a cookout at Ross and Bree's in the middle of the month, Connie asked about the ring in front of 6 people, and Bree said the shop was backed up, they were waiting on somebody's bench. It'd be well before August. She said it exactly the way you'd say a true thing. There was no flicker in it. Ross was flipping burgers 8 feet away and he didn't look up, because why would he? And I'll say this next part plainly, because it's the place where I could make myself sound sharper than I was. I didn't suspect a thing, not one thing. I thought about the ring maybe twice in 10 weeks, and both times I thought about it the way you think about somebody else's errand. If you've ever missed something enormous that was standing right there in your own kitchen, tell me about it in the comments. I'd like to know how ordinary that is. And subscribe if you're new around here, because I want you standing on a loading dock with me on the 8th of July when I ate half a sandwich and then didn't eat the other half for 2 days. The 8th of July was a Tuesday, and it was 90-some degrees, and the ceiling fan over the press had been dying loudly since June. I take my lunch on the loading dock out back because it's shade and it's away from the steam. 12:15 to 12:45. Turkey on wheat, a bag of chips I split with Suzette, and I scroll on my phone like everybody else on Earth. Every business on that square follows every other business on that square. That's not a strategy. It's just a small town, the bakery, the insurance office, the shoe store that's really a shoe store and a lawnmower repair, Stoll's on the corner. So when Perry Stoll puts up a picture of a piece he's finished, it comes past me, along with the bakery's Friday donuts and Hank's occasional photograph of a dog tied up outside. And there it was. 2 pictures side by side, the way they always do it. On the left, on a gray cloth, 1 plain yellow gold band with a round diamond in it. On the right, the same stone, out of the gold, set in something white and modern, with a little wedge of it standing up off a chain. The post was dated the 9th of June. I want to tell you I knew immediately. I didn't. What I did was give it about 4 seconds, the way you give anything 4 seconds, and start to scroll past, and something in the bottom of my stomach put its hand out and stopped me. So I went back, and I put my thumb and finger on the left-hand picture, and I pulled it open. It was shot straight down. Good light. Every jeweler shoots the same way, apparently, and I've thought about that 100 times since, how careful he was, how he wanted it to look like exactly what it was. The band was worn thin at the back the way a band gets on a hand that never comes off, and running across the bottom of it, catching the light, a little brighter than the gold on either side of it, was a seam. I sat down on the dock with my legs hanging off, and I looked at that seam for a long time. Then I read the caption. A customer brought us her late grandmother's stone and asked for something she'd actually wear. Same diamond, brand new life. Late. Connie was upstairs at Ambler Court at that exact minute with her feet up watching her programs. I'd taken her sheets back on Sunday. I read it 4 times. I'm not going to pretend that was a clear-headed 4 minutes, because it wasn't. My ears got hot and my hands got cold, and I sat on that dock and did the only useful thing I could think of, which was the arithmetic. The 9th of June. Bree took it the 5th of April. Connie asked about it at that cookout on the 14th of June, 5 days after this picture went up, and Bree told her the shop was backed up and Ross flipped a burger. Suzette came out to see where I'd got to and found me sitting there with my sandwich in my lap and half my chips on the concrete. She asked if it was Poppy. I said no. She asked if it was Neil. I said no. She said, "Well, then it's family," and went back inside, which is the single most accurate thing anybody said to me that entire summer. Here's what I did in the next 20 minutes, and I did it in this order, and I've been glad of the order ever since. I did not comment on that post. I did not screenshot it into the family group text with a row of question marks. I did not call my husband, and I did not call Bree, and God knows some part of me was already writing both of those calls. I went inside and I took the phone to the counter, and I printed it. 2 copies, both pictures, the caption, the date. That printer is 19 years old, and it is slower than a funeral, and I stood there while it went. And by the time the second copy came out, I had stopped shaking, and I understood something about myself that I don't entirely love. I don't calm down when I decide to. I calm down when there's a piece of paper. Then I put my apron on the hook and told Hank I was taking 15 minutes, and I walked down the square to Stoll's. I want to be careful about this part because I know how it could sound. I did not go down there to trap anybody or to get anybody in trouble. Perry Stoll has been on that corner since his dad handed it to him. He sizes half the rings in this county, and he cleaned my own wedding set for free the week Poppy was born. I walked in, and the bell went, and he came out from the back with his loop pushed up on his forehead. I asked him one question, and I asked it about nothing in particular, the way you'd ask about the weather. I said, "When somebody brings you an old piece in, before you do anything to it, do you take a picture of it?" And he leaned on the case and told me, in the mildly bored voice of a man explaining the obvious, the thing that turned out to be the whole ending of this story. Every piece that comes across a jeweler's counter gets photographed before the bench touches it, the face, the back, and the inside of the band, and those pictures stay in the file, whether the piece survives the work or not. He said it's for both sides. It's so a customer can't come back and say there was a bigger stone in it, and it's so a shop can't say there wasn't. He said he's got a file drawer of pieces that don't exist anymore. He said, "Half of what's in there got melted 20 years ago, and I could still show you what was written in it." I said thank you, and I bought a bottle of the pink cleaner for $8, so I hadn't walked in there for nothing. And I went back to work and pressed shirts until 4:30. I did not ask him whose ring it was. I want that on the record, since it's the one thing I could have done that night that would have made all the rest of it dirty. He wouldn't have told me anyway, and he'd have been right not to. But I also didn't ask, and I knew while I wasn't asking that I was choosing not to. That night, after Poppy went up, I took the picture off my refrigerator. Poppy's hands under Connie's hands, flower to the elbows. Taken 2 Christmases ago with my own phone, and I remember taking it because Connie was in the middle of telling Poppy that a person who owns a rolling pin has already made her first mistake. I zoomed in on Connie's left hand, and the ring's there, turned the way she wore it, and running across the bottom of that band, catching the kitchen light, is a thin, bright seam. Then I laid my phone next to the printout on the kitchen table and looked at the 2 of them, and that was the end of any part of me that was still hoping I'd made a mistake. I want to say something about how that felt, because it wasn't rage. I keep expecting to remember rage, and it isn't there. What I remember is a kind of terrible tidiness. 2 pictures, same seam. 1 date. It was the cleanest thing I'd ever seen, and I'd have given anything for it to be a mess. I told Neil on Thursday. I did it right, or what I thought was right. I waited until it was late and quiet, and I didn't hand him a phone. I told him out loud first, so he'd hear it from a person instead of a screen. And then I put the printout on the table between us, and I put my own picture next to it, and I let him take as long as he wanted. He took maybe a minute. He looked at it the way he looks at a wiring diagram. And then my husband sat back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands and said, "Robin, that ring was going to be hers anyway." I said, "It was going to be given to her, in August, with a card." I said, "He said Bree's been in that apartment every Sunday for 11 years, and where were we?" He said Connie's 90 and her hands are shot, and she hasn't had that thing on her finger in 3 years. He said, and this is the sentence I couldn't get past, "What's the difference between now and August?" And I said, "August is when Connie was going to see her face." He didn't have anything for that. He sat there with his jaw working, and then he said the true thing under all of it, and I've thought about it a lot since, and I think he'd been carrying it a long while. He said, "I wasn't there for Mom. Bree was. She slept in that chair 11 weeks, and I fixed furnaces. I don't get to be the one who tells her she took something." That's not a stupid thing to say. That's a man being honest about the size of a debt, but I need you to see what it does. It moved the whole conversation off a ring and onto a ledger between the two of them, and once it's on that ledger, there is no fact I can put on the table that isn't just me picking a side. He said he'd talk to her. He asked me to let him do it his way. I said, all right. It was Thursday. I gave him the weekend. By Monday, everybody knew, and not one of them had heard it from me. Here's what came at me that week. Neil's aunt called about a casserole dish she'd loaned me in the spring, and then asked, in the tone people use when they're reading off a script somebody handed them, whether I was doing okay. A cousin I hear from at Christmas texted me a heart. And Ross, who has never in his life said an unkind word, sent me a message that said, "Hey, B says there's been a misunderstanding about Nan's ring. Don't want anybody upset before the party. We good?" And then the phrase showed up. And once it showed up, it was everywhere. And it was so perfectly built for me that I have to admire it a little. Robin keeps a list. That's it. That's the whole weapon. Nobody had to call me a liar. And nobody had to argue with a photograph. They just had to say, in a fond voice, at a kitchen table, that Robin's the one who keeps a list. Robin writes it down. Robin's got a ticket for everything. You know how she is. It's her job, bless her. Do you see what that does? It takes the only thing I actually have that I write things down, that I know where a thing came from and who it belongs to, and turns it into a personality flaw. A charming one, even. And once it's a personality flaw, the papers in my purse aren't evidence anymore. They're a symptom, and it worked on me. That's the part I hate. 3 nights that week, I got up after Neil was asleep and went down to the kitchen and got that picture off the refrigerator and looked at Connie's hand under the light to make sure the seam was really there. 3 nights. On the 3rd one, I caught myself doing it and stood there in my own kitchen at 11 o'clock at night and felt genuinely ill. Because a woman doesn't check the same photograph 3 times to learn anything. She checks it because somebody's got her half convinced she's the kind of woman who'd see a seam that wasn't there. I put it back under the magnet, and I didn't check it again. That was the 18th of July. If the thing you're actually good at has ever been handed back to you as the reason nobody needs to listen, put it in the comments. I read them. And don't go anywhere. Because on the 21st of July, I drove out to my sister-in-law's house and gave her 26 days and an open door. And what she did with those 26 days is the only reason there was ever a scene at a 90th birthday party. Bree was on her back porch snapping beans when I pulled in. She had the bowl in her lap and the colander at her feet, and she'd cut her hair since June. I didn't ambush her. I want that plain. I brought the printout in my hand where she could see it, and I sat down on the step, and I said, "I need to ask you about Nan's ring." She didn't ask what I meant. That was the first thing. There wasn't 1 second of what ring. And that second is where an innocent person lives. She said, "Where'd you get that?" I said Perry posts his work. Everybody on the square posts their work. She looked at me, and I watched her run the whole thing in about 2 seconds, how many people follow that page, how long it had been up, what the caption said, and then she set the bowl down on the boards, and she went to a completely different place than I was ready for. She got warm. She said, Okay, sit down. Let me tell you what you're looking at. And she told me the band was worn through in the back, and Perry said it wouldn't take a sizing again, which is a thing that happens to old rings, and might even have been true. She said Connie hasn't worn it in 3 years and never will. She said her hands are done, Robin. She can't get a wedding band over that knuckle, and you know it. She looked out at her yard a while, and then she said she was never going to wear it again. Robin. She said the stone was going to sit in a mint tin in a drawer until somebody died, and then there'd be a fight about it, and she wasn't going to let that be what happened to her grandmother's diamond. And then she said, It's on a chain. I can put it on her at the party. She can hold it. She can wear it if she wants. Nothing's gone. And, I said, the writing's gone. And Bree said, It was on the inside, Robin. Nobody ever saw it. I want you to sit with that one the way I've had to. It was on the inside. Nobody ever saw it. As though a thing you keep against your skin for 68 years where no other living person can read it is worth less than a thing people can see. She had it exactly backwards, and she said it in a kind voice, and I don't think she has ever once understood why it landed on me the way it did. So I asked her the only question I actually cared about. I said, Bree, did you tell him she was dead? And she looked at the colander. She said, I said she was gone. I said, The caption says late. She said, I didn't write the caption. I said, Did you correct it? And she picked the bowl back up. Then she went at it from the other side, and I'll give her this. Her voice never went up either. Fran raised her, and Fran taught me, and neither one of us has ever known how to have a fight out loud. She offered me money, not to me, for Connie. She said the ring got appraised on the insurance in 2019 at $5,800, and she'd write a check for the whole thing that afternoon, if that's what this was about, and I could hand it to Nan myself and be the hero. I said Connie doesn't want $5,800. I said she wants a ring with 3 words in it and a Saturday in August where she gets to watch somebody's face. And Bree said, She's 90, Robin. I said, I know how old she is. And she said, Then think about what telling her buys. You want to be the one who does that to a woman 2 weeks before her party? For what? So you can be right about a band that's already gone? That's the best argument anybody made all summer, and I've never gotten it fully out of my chest. Because it's not a stupid question. It's just the wrong one. What it buys is that a 90-year-old woman doesn't stand up in front of 26 people and give a speech about a thing that isn't there. So I gave her the door, and I gave her plenty of room to walk through it. I said, Tell her yourself. Any day between now and the 16th. Kitchen, no audience, no party, nobody else in the room. Tell her the band was worn through. Tell her you made a call. Tell her you should have asked. I said I'd drive over and sit on the porch the whole time if she wanted somebody in the building, and I said I'd never bring it up again as long as I live. And I meant every word of that. I would have kept it, too. If Bree Dressler had told her grandmother the truth in that kitchen in July, I would have carried the whole thing to my grave and you would never have heard of any of us. Bree looked out at the yard for a while. Then she said, I'll figure it out. And that was it. She stood up with the bowl and went in and let the screen door go, and I drove home. 26 days. 3 Sundays she sat in that apartment with her hands in that woman's hair, and then on the morning of the party she did it one more time. Now let me stop and say the fair thing, because I've had a year to get it right and I'd rather say it than have somebody say it for me. Bree wasn't lying about the 11 years. She wasn't lying about the 11 weeks in that recliner. When Fran was dying, Bree changed her mother's sheets at 2 in the morning and then went to work at 7. And she did that for most of a season. And the rest of us sent flowers and drove down on weekends and told each other how strong she was being. When Connie fell in the parking lot 2 winters ago, Bree got there in 9 minutes. And here's the part nobody in that family will say out loud. The thanks always went sideways. Every holiday, Some cousin drives in from 4 hours away and gets stood up at the table and toasted for making the effort. And Bree is in the kitchen with a dish towel because she's not company, she's staff. I've watched it happen for 21 years, and I've clapped along with everybody else, and I never once said, out loud, at that table, that the woman doing the hair every Sunday was the one keeping this whole thing standing. That's real. It's a real debt, and this family never paid it, and I'm one of the ones who didn't. None of it reaches the 9th of June. On the 9th of June, a woman stood at a counter 3 doors down from where I work and let a man write down that her grandmother was dead so she wouldn't have to answer a question, and then she went home and did that living woman's hair 4 days later. A person can be owed a great deal and still not be owed that. Both of those are true at the same time, and I've had to hold them both, one in each hand, at every family dinner since. The post came down on the 28th of July. I checked it that morning out of habit, and it was gone. I already had it on paper, 2 copies, one in my purse and one in that found drawer at work, taped shut in an envelope with a ticket number on it in my own handwriting, because that's where I put things that belong to somebody who hasn't come for them yet. Neil asked me twice that last week what I was going to do, and I told him the truth both times, which was that I didn't know, and that whatever it was still Bree's to do first. And then on the 9th of August, 1 week out, I stopped at Ambler Court to drop off a blouse, and Connie made me sit down because she wanted to show me something. She had a jar of hand lotion on the table, and she'd been practicing. She couldn't get a ring over the left knuckle anymore, hadn't been able to in 3 years, and she'd worked out that the right ring finger would take one if she used lotion, and went slow and did it in the morning before her hands puffed. She showed me with an old dime store band she keeps in the same drawer. Worked it down over the knuckle, held her hand up, turned it in the light. She said, "I want it on when they cut the cake. Then I'm going to take it off and put it on her." And I sat in that chair and I said, "That'll be nice, Nan." I have replayed that 30 seconds more than any other 30 seconds of my life. I could have told her right there, quiet, no audience, exactly the way I'd told Bree to do it. Some nights I'm certain that's what a braver woman does. But she'd been practicing with lotion, and it was her party and her ring and her granddaughter, and it was not mine to take apart on a Saturday afternoon in a kitchen chair with a blouse over my arm. I decided the truth belonged to Connie and Bree, in that order, and that my job was to make sure it got to her before she said 3 words out loud in front of a room, not to be the one who said them. I don't know if that was right. I know it's what I chose, and I know I chose it on purpose, and I know exactly how much a week is when you're counting it. If you've ever had a week like that one, knowing a thing, waiting on somebody else to do the decent thing with it, checking your phone every hour, tell me in the comments how you handled it. Because I'd genuinely like to know. And stay with me. The 16th of August is 9 minutes long, and I've never been able to tell it fast. The 16th of August was a Saturday, and it was beautiful, which somehow made it worse. 4 o'clock in the community room at Ambler Court, church tables in a U, a sheet cake from the bakery over in Sedgwick with a photograph of Connie at 20 printed on it in frosting, and 26 people, which was every single name on the list in Bree's purse. She'd called every one of them herself. I got there at 2:30 to help set up, because I always do. Bree had the place cards out on the end table in a rubber band, in that round hand, and I went down the row and found mine, and it said, Robin Loomis, and I set it down at my chair the way I've set it down for 21 years. Ione Pruitt got there early too, and sat by the door so she could see who came in. And at about 3:30, while Bree was pouring iced tea into the good glasses, Ione said, out loud, in her one good ear voice, "That's a pretty necklace." And Bree put her hand up to her throat the way anybody does, and said, "Isn't it? Ross gave it to me in June." Ross was 12 feet away holding a bag of ice and said nothing at all. And I've thought about that a lot. And I've settled on the fact that Ross has never contradicted his wife in public in his life, and it wasn't going to start with a necklace. Connie came down at 4, on Neil's arm, in the good navy dress, hair set that morning. Bree had done it. She got me by the elbow before she even sat down, and she showed me her right hand, and she said, "First try, no lotion." She was so pleased with herself, 90 years old, and pleased with her own knuckle. We ate. Poppy sat on the floor by Connie's chair for most of it, because the folding chairs were too tall for her, and she'd rather be down there anyway. There were toasts. Somebody's husband told the screen porch story wrong, and Connie corrected him from her chair and got a laugh. It was, right up until it wasn't, one of the nicest afternoons that family has ever had. They cut the cake at 5:20, and after the plates went around, Bree got up and put a knife against the side of her glass, and the talking dropped out of that room in about 2 seconds, and she said she had something for Nan. She stood up in a room with 26 people in it, put a small blue box in that woman's hands, and told her it was her own wedding ring made new. She'd worked out what she was going to say. It was good. It was, in its way, the most loving thing anybody said all day, which is the part I still can't file anywhere. She told the room the band was worn through in the back after 68 years on one hand, and that the shop said it wouldn't take another sizing, and that she hadn't wanted her grandmother's stone sitting in a mint tin in a drawer waiting on a funeral. She said, "So I had them give it a new life, Nan. Happy birthday." Connie opened the box, and there was a ring in it. White gold, bright, one small round stone, and it looked like exactly what a person gets when they want something to look like a ring. She put it on her right hand, and it went over the knuckle, and she held her hand up and turned it in the light, and half that room said the sound people say, "Poppy clapped. My daughter clapped." And I sat there and remembered Bree running a little plastic sizer down Connie's right hand that afternoon in April, checking the other side too, and I remembered thinking at the time how thorough she was being. And then Connie did the thing she was always going to do, because it was the whole reason she'd been practicing with the lotion. She took it back off, and she tipped it toward the window to read the inside of the band, and she said to Ione across the table, "Sid put 3 words in this. Nobody's ever seen them but me." The room waited on her. She turned it. She turned it again. She got it close to her eyes and then far away from her eyes, the way you do, and she said, "There's nothing in it." And Bree said in front of her, in front of all of them, in the warm voice, the kind one, "They couldn't save the band, Nan. It's the stone that matters." That's when I stood up. I want to be clear about the size of what I did, because people have described it since as a scene, and it took under 4 minutes, and my voice never went above the register I used to tell a customer his suit isn't ready. I didn't plan a speech. What I had was 3 pieces of paper and a purse hanging off the back of my chair, and I'd had them 39 days, and I stood up because a lie was being told to a 90-year-old's face, and nobody else in that room was going to stop it. I said, "Nan, before you say thank you for that, I need you to look at something." And I walked around the U of the tables and put the first page down in front of her. 2 pictures side by side on a gray cloth. A plain yellow gold band with a round diamond in it, and the same stone out of the gold and set in white, and the caption underneath, and the date at the top. I read it out loud. I read it flat, the way you read a claim ticket, because there was nothing in it that needed any help from me. I said, "This was put up by Stoles on the 9th of June. That's the ring. The caption says a customer brought in her late grandmother's stone." Then I put the second page down, my own picture off my own refrigerator, blown up on a 19-year-old copier until you could see the flour in the creases of her knuckles. Connie's hand on my daughter's hands. And that thin, bright seam running across the bottom of the band where a shop in the next county did a cheap job in 1998. I said, "That's the seam. It's on the ring in the first picture, too. It's in the same place." And then I put down the 3rd page, and the 3rd page was the one that emptied the room, and it was 5 lines of my own handwriting. April the 5th. Bree takes the ring to be sized. June the 9th. The ring is photographed at the bench, apart. June the 14th. Nan asks about it at the cookout. Bree says the shop is backed up. July the 21st. I ask Bree, at her house. She tells me it's on a chain. July the 28th. The picture comes down. No adjectives. I didn't put one in. 19 years of writing tickets teaches you that a date does more damage than any word you could put next to it. Then I said the only unkind thing I said all night, and I said it to the table and not to her. I said, "It's on a chain. It's in this room. Ione Pruitt got there before anybody. 84 years old, sitting by the door. And she said not to me, not to Bree, to the room. In the voice of a woman correcting a record about herself. I told you an hour ago that was a pretty necklace. And you told me Ross gave it to you in June. Ross put the ice down. And Bree came apart the way I've since learned people come apart, in that order, and I could not have told you the order in advance. First it was crying, and it was real crying. She'd been in that apartment every Sunday for 11 years, she said. She said she'd slept in a chair for 11 weeks while her mother died. She said nobody in this family has any idea, none of you, not one of you. Then it went sideways. She said Neil hasn't taken Connie to a single appointment in 3 years. Ask him right now. She said, "Ross, tell them what it's been like." She looked for me last and she said, "You keep a list. Everybody knows you keep a list." And then it came out flat and it came out true, which is what makes it the worst thing she said. She said, "I'm the one who's been here. I get to decide what's kind." And I said the thing I'd been carrying since a kitchen full of newspaper 3 years ago. I said, "Bree, you told me none of it's really ours, that we're just the ones holding it. I believed you when you said it, and I still think it's mostly right. Sid wrote whose it was on the inside of that band, so nobody would ever have to take anybody's word for it." I said, "That's the part you had melted first." She didn't answer me. I don't think there is an answer. And then Connie, who hadn't said one word since there's nothing in it, put both hands flat on the tablecloth and asked her granddaughter one question, and the whole room heard it. She said, "Bree, did you tell that man I was dead?" Bree said, "I said she's gone, Nan. That's all I said." I didn't want to stand there and explain. And Connie said, "Take it off, Bree. I'm not finished with it." Bree reached up behind her neck with both hands and worked the clasp, and it took her a while because her hands were going, and nobody helped her, and she put the chain in her grandmother's hand. I said, "That's everything I've got." I'm sorry it had to be tonight. And I picked up my 3 pages and went back around the tables and sat down next to my daughter, and the party was over, whatever anybody wants to call what happened after. They cut the rest of the cake. 6 or 7 people left inside of 10 minutes with the very polite excuses that people who have known each other 40 years can produce on demand. Ross drove Bree home. He did not leave her, then or since, and I've stopped being surprised by that, and I've mostly stopped thinking he's wrong. Here's what happened after, and it happened at the speed paperwork happens, which is to say, nothing about it was dramatic at all. On the Monday, Neil called Perry Stoll, which is the first thing my husband did in this entire story without being asked. Perry pulled the file. He'd shot it the way he shoots everything, the face of it, the back of it, and the inside of the band on the 5th of April, before he ever put it on the mandrel. He printed the inside one 3 times, big, on good paper, Con, from Sid. April the 6th, 1957. A little bright seam running under the letters. He wouldn't take money for the prints, he said, and I'm quoting him because Suzette was standing there. "I take the pictures, so nobody has to argue. Somebody may as well get the use of them." The stone went back into plain yellow gold, a new band cut to the right hand, with the 3 words and the date copied off that photograph by a man with a loop on his forehead. It ran $940. Bree paid it, and nobody made her. That's the only money that changed hands in this whole thing, and I want to say clearly that the money was never once the point, and that the check she offered me on her back steps for $5,800 would not have bought 10 minutes of that Saturday back. It was ready the 2nd week of November. Neil drove her over and sat in the front of that shop for 2 hours while the letters got cut, and did not once look at his phone. He told me afterward, at the sink, with his back to me, "I should have gone with you in July." That's the whole apology. That's what I got. I took it, and I want you to understand that I took it with my eyes open, Because a man who gives you 4 true sentences a year has just spent 1. And because I've been married 21 years and I know what I've got, we're all right. We're not the same. Both of those are going to be true in this house for a long time. The card with the bird on it never came out of her handbag. It's back in the drawer under the tea towels, and it's still sealed. She got it out in November and asked me whether I thought she ought to give it to her someday anyway, and I said that 1 was hers and nobody else's, and she put it back in the drawer. Bree wrote Connie a letter, 4 pages. Connie let me read it, and it was about Fran, about the 11 weeks, and the recliner, and being the one who was there for 3.5 of those 4 pages. And there was one line near the end that said she was sorry about the band. She has never written me anything, and I don't expect her to. Some of that family took her side, and some took mine, and most of them did what most people do, which is act like the whole thing happened on television. Neil's aunt hasn't called since August. A cousin unfollowed me, which I understand is a thing now, and at Christmas, the card came addressed to Neil and Robin Dressler, in that round hand, and I sat in my car in the driveway and looked at it for a while, because I had wondered for 21 years whether she knew, and Bree still does Connie's hair on Sundays. I want to tell you that took something out of me, and it did. I found out from Ione. I had a whole afternoon about it, and then I sat down and made myself get honest, and here's where I came out. Connie is 90, that is her head and her hair and her Sunday. And the one thing this entire summer was about is that people don't get to decide what somebody else's is. I don't get a vote on it. Neither does anybody in that family. She looked at what her granddaughter did with her own eyes, on her own birthday, and she made her own call. Forgiving her is Connie's to do. It is not mine, and I haven't, and I'm not going to pretend at a table that I have. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, she wore it to dinner at our house. Right hand, went on first try, no lotion, and she made sure everybody in the room got told that part. And after the plates were cleared, my daughter climbed up on the arm of her chair and asked to see it, and Connie slid it off and gave it to a 9-year-old to hold, which nobody who's been in that family 5 minutes would ever have expected. Poppy tipped it at the window the way she'd watched her do in August. She read it out loud, Con from Sid, and then, because she's 9, and she has no filter at all, she said, "Who's Con?" And Connie said, "That's me. That was all mine." And she took it back and put it on. I still work the counter at Radke's. Tuesday of last week, a man came in for his father's suit, and there was a folded piece of paper in the breast pocket that had been through the machine. And I did what I have done 4,000 times, which is write his last name on a tag and put it in the drawer with the tape on it that says, "Found," and call him. Poppy does the tags on Saturdays now, in enormous letters, and Hank pays her in quarters and tells her his shoulder makes him need the help. That's what I've got out of this. Not much. A drawer, a ticket, a 9-year-old's handwriting. I used to think an heirloom was the object, the gold and the stone and the weight of the tin in a drawer, the thing you could hold up and hand over. Now I know an heirloom is the name somebody cut on the inside where nobody was ever going to see it, and the only way you truly lose one is to let somebody talk you out of whose it was. That's my story. 1 mint tin with a rubber band doubled around it, 3 sheets of paper printed on a Tuesday, and a chain that came off at a table in front of 26 people. If there's a thing of yours sitting in somebody else's house tonight to be cleaned, to be sized, to be mended, to be looked after, photograph it tomorrow before it goes anywhere. The face of it, the back of it, and the inside of it. That's 1 minute of your life. It costs nothing, and it's the whole distance between a story you can tell and one you can prove. Share this with the one in your family who does the driving and the sitting and the Sundays, because they're owed a great deal, and being owed is not the same as being allowed. Tell me in the comments about the thing in your family that had a name on the inside of it. Hit subscribe if you'd like to sit with us again. That's all of it. Thank you for sitting with me on the porch tonight. I'll see you in the next one.